Bill's not with us this morning, so I'm going to kind of just sort of take us through the agenda. Since we have a quorum, let's just go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the minutes from last time. Anybody?
Good that we approve the minutes
Thank
from,
you.
yes, the September. Thank you. Yeah, 2025.
Do we have a second? It's usually Terry.
Second.
Oh, somebody jumped in first. Okay, great. Thank you, Amy. And vote from everybody? Approve?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Good. Okay. And then for purposes of this meeting, the agenda, I just need a motion to approve, and then we can go ahead and have our speaker join. He's here. Let's go ahead and do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting?
This is Terry, so moved.
Thank you, Terry. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Sherry. So everybody say aye or no, whatever for this agenda.
Aye.
Okay, great. I didn't think you'd say no. So it's going to be a good one. Thank you. So that passes. So we're going to go ahead and have our speaker join us for remarks. And Joe Pereira, our deputy director, is going to introduce Joe Daniel.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I get the pleasure here this morning of introducing a good friend of mine who we have been working together quite a bit and have had lots of deep conversations on a lot of range of topics. And so I'm going to introduce Joe Daniel this morning. Joe is the principal for carbon-free electricity at RMI. He formerly worked in where I believe met him was with Union of Concerned Scientists, possibly at Synapse Energy Economics, but I can't recall. But we've known each other for many years. He is a MPA from Columbia, and I think is very well known within energy circles around his work. For his work around uneconomic dispatch of electricity plants, of rebalancing ROE, and has really taken on of late issues around energy burden, customer protections, low-income energy assistance issues. And so he's going to talk with us today. I don't want to speak for Joe, but I know he's always down for a good tough question, and we'll cover a broad range of topics. And so, if he goes over anything, please jump in, and I have some questions that I might jump in with too. So Joe, welcome to the Utility Consumers Board, and take it away.
And thank you for having me. I was just talking to somebody on Friday about how I don't get to do expert testing anymore, and so I don't get cross-examined. And I was one of those weirdos who always enjoyed a good cross-examination as an expert witness. So yeah, I would love any questions that you all have on today's presentation. What I'm hoping to share today, assuming I can get my computer to share the screen. It was working a minute ago. And now I can't pull it up. That's very strange. So I want to talk about low-income programs, energy poverty, and safeguards for vulnerable customers. And that terminology is what RMI uses to describe a range of, oh, sharing is turned off. Can sharing get turned back on?
I thought you were on there. Let me check one more time.
Yeah, I was on there a second ago, but now when I click, it says it's turned off.
All right, try now.
Here we go. Excellent. Thank you so much. Can I get a thumbs up just to make sure that you all are seeing an agenda? All right, awesome.
Yep, looks good.
So when you hear somebody from RMI talk about safeguards, what we really mean are the policies that we put in place that make sure that as we address energy costs, that nobody slips through the cracks, that people of low income populations, fixed income, that they have policies in place to make sure that they can also afford their electricity. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that matters. We're going to talk about a little bit about the numbers of and a deeper understanding of what energy burden really is. Then we'll talk about a whole bunch of policies and analyses that RMI has conducted and research that we've done. And then if we have time, we've built a energy poverty policy simulator that I got to go over with the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates this past summer. And I've pulled up Colorado and a couple of policies for Colorado so that we could go over the results of that tool live with you all if you're all interested. So, I am but one person at RMI working on this topic. I wanted to introduce the rest of my team, Maria, Karina, David, and Katie, who did the bulk of this analysis and research that I'm here presenting with you all. Household energy affordability is, when we talk about affordable energy, what we're fundamentally talking about is the ability to pay your monthly electric and gas bill without foregoing basic necessities or risking your health and safety. So that means paying your electric and gas while keeping your home at a safe and healthy temperature and being able to afford nutritious groceries and medicine. And I think a lot of people throw out like, oh yeah, you need to be able to not forego food and medicine. And people don't always stop to think about why somebody would forego food and medicine in order to pay their electric bill. And that is, well, in some cases, your food needs to be refrigerated or your medicine needs to be refrigerated. And therefore having electricity is essential to preserving those necessities. But it's also because, and I think this is like one of the most hard-hitting facts, is that if you don't have air conditioning in the summer or heating in the winter or electricity that can serve your refrigerator, that might be deemed a unfit or unhealthy household for a child, and child protective services can be called in to intervene. And so the real life and human impacts of not being able to afford electricity and getting disconnected are incredibly sharp. And I think it's always important to sort of ground ourselves in the human costs of what happens when energy becomes unaffordable. So the literature, the academic literature, tells us that energy affordability isn't necessarily binary; it's a gradient. And we usually measure that by energy burden, which is the percentage of your income, of the household income that's going to household energy costs. So that could be delivered fuels, home heating, electric, and gas. This excludes transportation costs. And we generally consider energy to be affordable or even cheap if it is below 6%. And then if it's above 6%, we start calling that unaffordable, starting with moderately unaffordable, high, severe, extreme, and catastrophically unaffordable energy at above 20%. And it's important to remember that, who pays that high, who has that high of energy burden. It usually is predicted by your income level. Income level is the greatest predictor of your energy burden, with low income families in the United States paying on average 20% of their income towards energy. So having catastrophically unaffordable energy for people living at or below the federal poverty line. So it is disproportionately affecting low income. The energy crisis, the energy affordability crisis, is disproportionately affecting low income. And I'll admit, I did not have the chance to update all of these graphs to be Colorado specific. So this is not Colorado specific. This is at the federal level, national data. So what happens when energy becomes hard to pay? What happens when it's hard to pay your bill? Well, you start to get missed payments. Eventually, you'll get a missed payment fee, a disconnection notice. Your bills will go into arrearages, which can result in, sometimes that debt collectors coming after you. You'll get a disconnection notice and then a disconnection fee once you're disconnected. If you're able to recover and pay all of those accumulated fees and get reconnected, oftentimes you're back to trying to pay your electric bill. If that bill spikes because of gas prices or a hot summer month, it can restart this cycle of energy poverty all over again. And we're going to talk about the interventions that can happen at each one of these phases. And the important thing to take away here is that if we can control costs, as well as implementing these safeguards that I've talked about, we can make energy affordable and we can break the energy poverty cycle. Like, this is not a impossible problem to solve. We actually know what the policies are and how much they cost to break the energy poverty cycle and end energy poverty. RMI approaches this concept of energy affordability through this framework. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but essentially it's utilities have to control spending to put downward pressure on rates. Customers should be able to maintain agency, including choice and control and predictability to help maintain costs. And decision makers, like legislators and regulators, allocate costs and spread those costs around through cost allocation, through determining what gets recovered through rates versus tax base and other ways. But it's important to know that for each of these things, there is a safeguard and there is a cost control mechanism. And RMI has done an extensive job articulating all of the options for cost control across the electric utility sector. I'll share these slides, but there's a QR code here to go to that report. We're not going to talk about cost control, though. We're actually going to focus on the safeguard side. And there is a distinct role for targeted affordability solutions. Nationally, low-income households have energy burdens that are 7 or more times higher than non-low-income households, as we saw earlier, and therefore are more likely to get disconnected and suffer the consequences of those disconnections, of that loss of electricity. Research consistently shows that these disconnections are dangerous and deadly and perpetuate the energy poverty cycle, and that clean, reliable, and affordable energy systems can work and can meet the realities and the needs of customers. And I want to propose these numbers: 75% versus 2%. If we wanted all of everyone to be able to afford energy, right? If we looked at those energy burden charts from earlier, we would have to reduce overall energy costs by 75% in order to make sure that low-income customers could afford their electricity, right? That is way too much pressure to put on cost control strategies, right? The likelihood of us in an era of load growth, an era of needed investment in infrastructure that is in some places severely dilapidated and outdated, we need to be spending a lot more money. We can put downward pressure, we can do it efficiently, but the likelihood of us being able to cut costs by 75% is very challenging to imagine. Or we could direct 2% of costs to low-income families and provide the same reduction in bills. The low-income energy burden above 6% of energy costs represents less than 2% of total system costs. So we could reduce all costs by 75%, or if we can reduce costs by 2% and channel those savings to low-income customers, or offset those savings by channeling direct assistance to low-income customers, we could end energy poverty. That's how much it would cost. So what would we do? How would we target those savings? There's 4 things we need to reduce. We need to reduce energy needs, through things like energy efficiency, reduce energy rates, reduce disconnections, and reduce the amount of customer debt that is accumulated and collected. So I think in a later slide, we'll have the states that have these policies, but here are the 5 policies that we're going to talk about today. Low-income energy efficiency programs, which are pretty much universal. Low-income discount rates, which only about 12 states have. Percentage of income payment plans, which about 9 states have. Disconnection protections and arrears management plans. So let's start by talking about arrears management, or debt and utility debt and debt collection. So 37% of Americans have paid a late fee in their utility bill in the past 12 months. It is, falling behind on your utility bills is now fairly common amongst residential customers. And it's really important that as we think about how these fees are issued and collected, to make sure that the late fees are cost-based and not punitive, right? That these cost fees are associated with the actual costs of the utility not recovering their costs fast enough, of having then to follow up and collect those costs. But right now, most fees are actually in some ways punitive, in that they penalize the customer for falling behind on their bill, rather than trying to create, which then just piles up, right? It perpetuates that cycle of falling behind on your bill. Bills pile up, then you don't pay anything because you can't pay off everything. And that's why arrears management plans kind of are a policy that help where the utility and the customer work together to reduce customer debt. But in some states, and I actually I wasn't able to determine if Colorado is one of these states. But in some states, the utility will then sell that debt to a third-party collector. And what I find confusing about this is utilities have something called uncollectibles, or the amount of essentially residential or electric bills that they weren't able to recover directly from customers. And then they recover that on the rates of all other ratepayers. So in a way, if a customer doesn't pay their bill, their neighbors end up paying the costs. So the debt was in a way collected, right? If I fell behind on my mortgage and my neighbors in my building got together and paid 10% each of my mortgage that month, then my mortgage got paid. But for utilities, they're able to still have that debt on the balance sheet and then sell it to a third-party collector who will then try to recover it. And so the utility isn't double collecting. All right, I want to be very clear that I don't think any utility is charging customers for the unpaid balance and then recovering. I mean, there might be some, one-off instances. There might be some exceptions to that. But for the most part, I don't think the utility is double collecting, but society is essentially double collecting on unpaid utility bills. And so there is an idea that we should be preventing, outlawing, encouraging, or incentivizing the end of selling utility customer debt. Then there are legal actions. If debt collection efforts through a third-party agency fail, utilities can initiate legal actions to try to recover that debt. This includes wage garnishment, which is a pretty alarming idea that utilities are going in and garnishing wages of customers, predominantly low-income customers, who are then only going to have a harder time paying their energy bills, right? It is, again, part of that. That's why, again, I put the energy poverty cycle at the beginning, because all of these actions that we take to recover the costs end up making it harder for the individual customers to go and pay their electric bill. And then, of course, there's negative credit reporting.
Joe? Joe,
Yeah.
there's a question in the chat from Ron Lair. Ron, why don't you share that with everyone, please?
I don't want to break into
Oh,
Joe's presentation, but
Oh.
I just wondered if we know anything about triple net lease low income customers.
I don't have any specific data here on that. I do know this is not what you're asking. I apologize, but it does remind me that there are some states that allow for landlords to kick out their tenants for failing to pay an electric bill. But that is obviously different than a place where all of it is integrated.
thanks.
Joe,
Excellent question. Thank you,
question. Do you mind clarifying the last slide, what you meant by society pays double? I didn't quite gather that.
Yeah. So in a world where let's say a utility has $5 million in uncollected retail bills, right? So you have that 5 million. They then go to the commission and ask for cost recovery of that 5 million and go to all the other ratepayers and collect that 5 million. So the 5 million in uncollected bills gets collected by the utility. They usually don't collect 5 million. They usually they sell that debt. Not usually. In some situations, they sell that $5 million of debt for, let's say, $500,000. So they actually only collect 4.5 million from retail customers. They take the 500,000 in revenue from the debt collector, and that's their make whole. That $500,000 goes to the debt collector, and then they go to the customers who accrued that debt and then try to collect it again. So if they have the potential for the 5 million, the $4.5 million to be collected from retail customers, and then again for that 5 million to be collected from the original debt holders.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So you're pointing out a potential, whether in the tariff, the timing of the rate case, that this could be a potential occurrence.
Yeah, and we've seen it in Michigan. Like that's where I can say this is definitely happening.
Okay.
I do not know if it's happening in Colorado, but it's definitely a pathway where the customer, like, it's just, if the utility wants to have uncollectibles, I'm fine with them collecting that. But then to create a pathway where even though the debt has been paid to the utility through you and me and everyone else who pays their electric bill, for there to be another pathway for that cost to get collected directly from the person, feels to me like double counting.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And then I've talked a little bit about sort of the destabilizing effect on households. RMI loves to bring the receipts, and this is from our latest disconnections handbook, where we outline strategies for commissions to reduce disconnections in their state. On the left, you see the raw data that is collected by the Energy Justice Lab on disconnections. They collect this through direct reporting as well as issuing discovery requests in proceedings across the country. It is a little bit misleading because we haven't had great reporting over the entire time period. So it looks like there's a huge increase in disconnections, which is not entirely reflective of the data. If you look at it where you sort of control and then create an average annual utility disconnection rate by utility type, here on the right-hand side of the screen, you see that disconnections are, like, we've been able to make a significant dent in disconnections, particularly in investor-owned and cooperatives. We've been able to get very low disconnection rates. In 2020, when there was a disconnection moratorium, disconnections have bounced back up since then for investor-owned utilities. But for cooperatives, they've managed to keep them still quite low for the cooperatives that are reporting on data. So disconnection protections can be targeted or they can be broad. So what are some examples of that? Procedural requirements, or targeted for extreme weather protections or for specific customer types, as well as creating specific performance metrics or targets for the utility on disconnections. But they also could just be creating things like lifeline electricity rates, which guarantee that all customers get a certain amount of electricity regardless of payment, or temporary moratoria like we did during the COVID era. And we've even seen some utilities experiment with permanent bans to all disconnections, both in the US and in Europe. Here are the states with weather-based disconnection protections. You can see Colorado has both cold and heat-based protections. But when we look at other vulnerable customer protections, Colorado is not one of the states that is, front of pack necessarily. It does have medical-related protections, but unlike 14 other states, there are no protections specifically carved out for the elderly, those with disabilities, military status, or families and households with newborns or young family members. Moving on to, so we've talked about lowering debt, we've talked about lowering disconnections, now let's talk about lowering energy consumption. Best way to do that is through energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is the gift that keeps on giving, and while many states are very aggressive on the most cost-effective energy efficiency, low income usually gets, or low moderate income LMI energy efficiency usually gets carved out. Many states are not achieving all of the potential savings from low income energy efficiency. This is from ACEEE, where there, states with the potential electricity savings in low income households that are not yet been realized. One of the issues is that the way we evaluate cost effectiveness doesn't always account for all of the benefits of having targeted low income energy efficiency. I will say that based off of the results of some of our analysis that we'll hopefully get to a little bit later, even when low income energy efficiency isn't necessarily the most cost effective from a system wide, it's often the most cost effective way to address energy poverty, and the specific targeted benefits is, that can be achieved through low income and low and moderate income energy efficiency. Another way is by having low income discount rates or percentage of income payment plans that are targeted for customers that are on a low income rate class. Many states don't have. I apologize again. Does Colorado have a low income rate class? No. Okay. So in states that do, there's a couple different ways that low income rate classes are set up. So sometimes it's just a straight 40% or whatever certain fixed percentage off of the rate that the customer is charged. So if they would have been charged $100 that month, they get a 40% discount and are only charged $60. And in some states, it's graduated or tiered so that the lowest income populations get the highest discount rate, and then as you go up the income class, you get a reduction in your discount. Because if you're at the threshold of federal poverty line, you need less of a discount than if you are in, severe energy poverty. And then percentage of income payment plan is another opportunity where people's energy bills essentially get capped to a certain percentage of their income. And I was just reading a report from the Michigan Consumer Advocate where a pilot percentage of income payment plan in the consumer's territory reduced arrearages, reduced or increased unpaid percentage of bills paid on time, increased the percentage of the bill that was paid on time, and reduced arrearages for the customers by 90%. So a huge reduction in the amount of debt that was being accumulated by these customers. Remember, those arrearages, if they don't get paid, they still get collected onto all ratepayers, right? So that is, if you can reduce the amount of, if you can increase the amount that low-income customers are actually paying, because they can afford to pay the $40 and they can't afford to pay the $100, so they pay zero, right? So if you can get them to pay the $40, that's actually better for the utility. It's better for the other customers who end up covering the bill if it doesn't get paid, and it's better for the customer themselves because they can maintain electricity service. So having low income rates, having these special programs can really prove to be beneficial to all ratepayers, to all customers. And then I want to talk about the cliff populations. And this is essentially, if you have a low income program, but not a moderate income program, or the idea of, oh, you were on the cliff of being eligible for certain benefits. And this is where the tiered discount rate really shines, because you can have, let's say, a percentage of income payment plan that caps electric bills at, say, 10%. So not, still within an unaffordable range. For whatever reason, you want to maintain costs of the program. But, you still want to give everybody a little bit of a discount, so that you get higher on-time payments or for whatever policy reasons. You can sort of, not just look at the hard lines of, say, 65% of state median income, right? You can have higher granularity by tiering it out. And then I think this is my last slide, which is on funding mechanisms, because I think one of the issues that is important to acknowledge here is that states have been passing policies that get the costs to fund those policies are being paid for by ratepayers. So whether it's a renewable portfolio standard or EV electrification goals or whatever the policy may be, a lot of state governments will then force the recovery of those costs onto electric bills. And electric bills are regressive. Low-income customers pay a much higher percentage of their income, whereas taxes tend to be either flat or progressive. So low-income customers will pay a smaller percentage. And so there's this idea of what should the ratepayers be responsible for versus taxpayers versus investors, right? There's been a huge push, and if I remember correctly, Colorado was one of the states that told its utilities you're no longer allowed to collect certain things from ratepayers. If you want to belong to a trade association that does lobbying, you got to, your investors are responsible for those costs, not ratepayers. And not taxpayers too. So there are questions about who pays for it that I think are really important when addressing energy affordability. And so lastly, I'm going to talk about the Energy Poverty Policy Simulator, which is really designed to help us understand what are the costs and benefits of these policies. How do costs get shifted? So let's say you have a discount rate for low-income customers and you're paying for it through ratepayers. How will that increase other ratepayers' bills versus what happens if you're able to pay for it through taxes? Or in some states, the utility investors will pay a portion of the low-income energy efficiency program out of investor dollars rather than out of usually through settlement agreements. So we allow you to choose the different funding mechanisms. We allow you to choose the different policies, and then it will evaluate what the costs and effects are on electric bills. We look at energy assistance programs like LIHEAP, low-income discount rates, percentage of income payment plans, low-income energy efficiency, and arrearage forgiveness programs. We also have a number of cost control policies, which is that that long list of things that lower costs for everybody, and it will output energy bills, energy burden, the benefits by customer class, and the costs by ratepayer, shareholder, and income groups. So I'd love to jump to that, but before I do, I'm going to hold for questions.
I guess I'll get, oh, Sherry, you go, please.
Joseph, thanks for the great program. It is very informative, and living in this space, it's a particular interest for me. But one of the questions is, how many states have actually adopted these types of policies? Who it's leading in this space as far as different states that have pursued, shifting the burden off of low-income families? I guess I'd like to know who the leaders are in this work.
Yeah, so in discount rate, about 12 states have a low-income discount rate, and that includes Arizona, California, Connecticut, Georgia, Illinois, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. Percentage of income payment plan is a subset of those. Well, not even it's not a perfect subset. It's a much smaller group of states that have that cap on electric bills based off of your income. Colorado, I think, has a PIP pilot, or does it have a full-fledged PIP program?
Full-fledged PIP for all the regulated utilities.
Okay. Delaware, Illinois, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, and New York and Michigan and California. But I think Michigan's is a pilot, New York's is a pilot, and I think California is also a pilot with their investor-owned utilities.
Thank you. Well, we received these slides, Cindy. Is it okay?
Yes.
All right.
I will share with whoever I need to share with, and then we can share them
Yeah.
with whoever needs them.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you listed a lot of those on the slide, so thank you, Joe.
Yeah. I had a tendency to leave information on the slide and then not voice it over because I knew they were going to be shared and didn't want to get bogged down in listing. 3 minutes of listing states isn't always the most engaging presentation, so I didn't want to over index on that.
Mike?
Yes. Joe, thank you for a great presentation. I think you did a really good job of summarizing what is an extremely complex and very difficult to understand set of pertinences, and I really appreciate the way that you stepped us through that. So thank you very much. I have more of a sort of a comment on this. I just appreciated what you said. I just wanted to go back a little bit to the disconnections, to the disconnection slide that you had, where you were recognizing that there's been a reduction in the amount of disconnections. I just wanted this group to be aware that the moratoria that existed through COVID, that I think most utilities adhered to, did and still continues to have an impact on those numbers. I know you mentioned that. I just wanted to make sure that people here were aware that yes, there's a specific reason why those disconnections went down, and it's effectively because utilities were told that they can't disconnect people. They tried to disconnect people, but they were told that they cannot disconnect people due to COVID. Disconnections still continue, and I appreciate your comments there about extreme weather moratoria, whether it's hot or cold. and many states are sort of still continuing to grapple with how they deal with the moratoria and the disconnections that result from extreme weather events. But I like that, like the way you presented that. I also wanted to pick up a little bit on Ron's point that he brought up on low income, how many people rent versus own. And my statistics may not be as accurate, but based on my last assessment of this, which was earlier this year, about 42% of this country rent rather than own. So there's a huge burden here. And then the other part of Ron's comment, which I thought was really appropriate, and I wonder if you could address this, Joe, in any capacity, is landlords, especially of low income people who are disproportionately impacted, I guess is the way I refer to them. They are at risk of being kicked out should weatherization or other energy efficiency measures go into effect. Landlords can kick out their renters either by charging more rent or just pushing people out. And I wondered if you had any comments on sort of the impact of weatherization and other mechanisms that are specifically targeting disproportionately impacting people, and how that might resonate with landlords and utilities.
Yeah, if I understand, I want to make sure I'm understanding the question so that I address it properly. The question is, when landlords engage in some of these energy efficiency measures like weatherization, they want to recover those costs, and so they need to increase the rates. And this is really fascinating. It was, it's been a while since I've actually gotten to dive deep into low income energy efficiency program specifics. The split incentive, as it's sometimes referred to, which is this notion of if the renter isn't paying the electric bill, they have no incentive to invest in the energy efficiency, and is been, I think, widely studied and analyzed in the sector. I remember reading reports that were 10 years old when I was in grad school, more than 10 years ago. So I think different states have addressed it in different ways. The idea that the landlord is actually the one who benefits though from it, that if a landlord engages in energy efficiency, their energy costs go down, and therefore they, in theory, if it's done cost effectively, should be able to charge less for their homes. The other important thing, I think, is how you get those landlords to participate. I think that has been, from my understanding, the bigger challenge on this front is participation levels of low and moderate income deep energy efficiency programs. We've gotten pretty good. We've figured out how to get good participation on light bulbs. But on the deeper retrofits, furnaces, double pane windows, those are the more challenging initiatives to get implemented. And I think
those are discretionary income based, right? So it's really good. I guess, again, another comment here, not trying to monopolize this, but this is a subject that I'm really quite involved in. The Inflation Recovery Act that was pushed forward was great in many ways, except for the fact that it still continued to double down on discretionary income for those most efficient processes. I don't know how many people who are on income or the income poverty level in the United States are going to go out and buy an $11,000 cold climate heat pump. So I think there's more work for us to do as a board here to really understand the impacts of these energy efficiency measures and where they really impact, especially the disproportionately impacted community. Age of building, landlords, whether it might be this discretionary issue that we talked about. I think it's just really important that we balance the positive here don't let the utility off the hook, but continue to think effectively about innovative ways to solve these issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and those upfront costs are a real killer to some of the programs too, right? And LIHEAP allows, I think, 20 or 25% of the funds to be used towards energy efficiency measures. And if you're doing deep energy retrofits, that ends up being like 4 households for like it could be a really small number for a single utility. Because it's a capital project and the funds have to come out from that same year. So I think there's also opportunities with innovative finance. Where again, we talk about like, if it can be guaranteed by the federal government because it's going to be administered through LIHEAP, like that should be a low risk, perspective. So are there ways that it can either be backed by the LIHEAP program to be financed or by this, backed by the state? Are there other ways that we can do to draw down that upfront cost?
Yeah. Just remember that the Trump administration fired the entire LIHEAP administrative staff. So the $5.2 billion in LIHEAP funding is just sitting there, not going to be allocated for year 2026 and beyond. I think that type of program is the sort of thing where we need to leverage some sort of securitization model as best we can. But I think there is actually some more simplistic models. And I just wanted to give you a shout out for your fuel cost report that you put out a couple of years back. I thought you had some really insightful ideas in that fuel cost impact. And at some stage, I would love the board to sort of look at that fuel cost, especially the fuel cost sharing part of that you put together. I think there's some real ways that we can provide some value to the utility and the consumers through the implementation of that program. Okay, I'm done for the typing. Sorry.
Thanks, Mike. I see Amy and then Jessica. Amy.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Wait, hold on. Yeah, I unmuted myself. I wanted to double check. Hey, thank you for that. And by the way, did you have a cat behind you? That's
a dog.
Okay, a dog. I'm like,
she thinks she's a cat.
We saw the ears, and I was hoping someone was going to make an appearance. Anyway, thank you for this. I've got a comment and a question, and so I'm just going to throw the question out there, and then I'll follow up with a comment. My Velcro Greyhound, perfect. You said sharing costs with investors. I'm curious what that looks like and which states have been good at having cost sharing with, obviously with investor-owned utilities. Which ones have there been that cost burden is shared between ratepayers and the shareholders? That's one. And then two, look. Very sweet. Thanks for sharing. The other one is, so I have a nonprofit. I co-founded a nonprofit that models cost and reliability. And the Clean Heat Plan in particular in Colorado is of concern to me, at least based on the modeling that we have seen, the cost that is going to be on ratepayers for that. And all the utilities have said they can't meet the targets with the rate cap. So then now the rate cap, the question is, do we get rid of the rate cap in order to meet the emissions goals? And this, to me, I'm afraid will just aggravate some of what you're talking about, as those costs are put upon ratepayers. And I know that this board has been very active, and Tom Dixon has been in testimony, and I've certainly watched his testimony. But that's just one of those that I'm super concerned about, that at some, how can we address it on the front end? I get that there are emissions targets for Colorado, and I'm not arguing that. What I'm arguing is there a better way to do this? Some of these rate cases and these timelines are tough. Not a single utility has said they can that they can meet it. So the question is cost sharing with investors, and then any thoughts on Colorado's clean heat plan. I appreciate it and love the fact. Thank you for the cameo appearance of your fabulous greyhound.
Yeah, she's the star of the show. Let's be honest. So I think there's two ways I've seen really productive and good cost sharing between investors and ratepayers. The first is through settlements, and it is very typical for the consumer advocate in states to be in negotiations on a rate case or in a proceeding and enter into a settlement with the utility. And we've seen in many circumstances the consumer say, all right, well, we want investors, we want $1 million not from ratepayers being put into the low income energy efficiency program or into debt forgiveness or into energy assistance payments or for a pilot on whatever soup du jour is important in that moment. And so I think those have been really effective, particularly when they're addressed at like low income energy efficiency, arrearage forgiveness, things that can help break that energy poverty cycle, because they have a compounding effect, right? It helps people get on, if you erase the debt, it helps people get on their feet. They can start paying a normal bill because they don't have to pay the late fees and pay back the debt forgiveness payment plan, right? It can actually be, it's way more than just like a one-time payment. It's actually an investment in the future. And when we can get commissions to think about it more as an investment, when we can get the utilities to think of it more as an investment rather than a one-off, I think it can be really transformative. The other way we've seen this is in things like fuel cost sharing or performance-based regulation or performance incentive metrics, where the utility has some skin in the game. And if they do XYZ really, really well, they will make more. And if they don't do it very well, then their investors have to eat the costs. And that's the fundamental idea of fuel cost sharing. You give the utility a budget, all right? But you can apply this to, don't apply it just to fuel, apply it to whatever concept you want. You give them a budget. And if you can do that thing for that budget, then you get to keep that money. If you over budget, your investors, you still have to do the thing. You still have to meet the reliability standard, but you have to eat some of those costs. There's a 10% sharing or 5% sharing, right? And that skin in the game creates an incentive for the utility to do a better job managing costs. And maybe the utility ends up being under budget, which is in the consumer's benefit, and they get to take a little bit back to their investors, which is in the investor's benefit, right? So it creates the win-win condition that can be really powerful.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I can learn more about Colorado's clean heat program and get back to you on it. I'm just not familiar enough.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you have thoughts on it. I get it. I know you're in DC, but I just think it's one of those things that I'm super worried about what those costs are going to do to ratepayers in Colorado. So
yeah, well, I mean, RMI is a Colorado-based organization,
yep.
So I would be surprised if nobody at my organization doesn't have thoughts and opinions on the clean heat program. I just don't happen to be one of them, but I'm happy to circle back and find out what I can.
Thank you. Maybe you can share whatever you find out, and Cindy can share it with the rest of us. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jessica.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. Very insightful. And it led me to think about, I was curious if you could help define the standard that you or RMI or these reports are based on, which is like that piece about reducing energy poverty, such as like where 6% comes from, or what is the standard of, then this leads into all the work of, how to support that. But, what is like also an example, like what is the assumed right of people in energy?
Yeah. That is such a great question, because it should have a simple answer, but it's not one. So I love the question because it's an interesting opportunity to dive into something, which is that the original 6% target for household energy costs was essentially picked out of thin air. It was like your household costs should be 25% of your total income, and your energy costs should be X% of that, which translates to 6% of your total income. But research then started finding out that 6% in a lot of states is about where customers start to struggle with paying their electric bill. So that should be what the real standard should be is, can you pay your electric bill and your other necessities? At whatever threshold that becomes a challenge, that should become the threshold that you set. Generally, we see that as 6% for electric and gas, or 4% electric, 2% for gas, averaged for the whole year. There is a growing body of research that shows that there are great discrepancies about that 6% number. For example, in some states, people spend a lot more on their household, right? Like in New York, if you're in New York City, you're not spending 25%, you're spending 33, 35% of your income on your home. And so like, should we increase the amount of that percentage that's going towards electric bills? Like, is that a reasonable amount, or is it a lower amount because you have less money because you're spending so much, you're in such an expensive city? We talked about LIHEAP funding being a little bit uncertain next year with, the entire staff being fired. SNAP benefits right now aren't going out, right? And if you are getting less money to pay for your food, you essentially have less money. That money is now going to be like, all right, well, do I pay electric or do I pay my food bill? And so while the 6% threshold is the industry standard, it should be very carefully implemented. Like I would say that's always the right starting point, but it might never be the right ending point, because the conditions in New York versus Colorado versus California versus Texas, like they're all going to be different. And then the other thing that we didn't talk about is for low and for fixed income populations, volatility is the enemy of affordability, right? Like, paying a $120 electric bill is hard enough. What's even worse is expecting a $120 electric bill and then being hit with a $160 bill. And so having predictability and having steadiness is really, really valuable for low and fixed income populations. And so also like, it might be 6% on a per annum basis, but like, does that mean they should pay more in the spring? Like, should there be a way to like balance that out over the course of a year? And that is an area of research that we are working with academic institutes to try to uncover a little bit more of. We have a really great relationship with the University of Indiana and the University of Pennsylvania, which run the Energy Poverty Lab, which is dedicated to answering these exact questions that we're all discussing today.
Great, thank you.
I don't see any other hands, but I have to ask you this question, Joe, even though it seems to be sort of radioactive, definitely in most utilities, and that is when it comes to supporting low-income customers, helping them pay their bills, having lower bills, shareholders do not kick in towards that. You said there can be an option in a settlement, but that's a one-off. Mm-hmm. And so what about, this is a monopoly. That's the key to me. Where are the shareholders helping their monopoly customers who can't afford bills, pay bills? Like I said, that's radioactive to our friends at the utilities for sure. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think Joe mentioned at the top of the call that mm-hmm. I've done quite a bit of work on utility ROE. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I find, like my big takeaway on the utility ROE is that it is like so many economic problems, nonlinear. That and that I mean you can lower a utility ROE and save customers money in the short run, But if you lower, there does become a point where it becomes unpalatable for investors, right? And ROEs were at a national level in 2020, 2019, 2021, that time period, COVID era, actually, coincidentally, where the risk premium for a utility investment versus a 10 or 30-year treasury bill was at an all-time high. And when I say all-time, I mean literally as far back as I can find data on ROEs. But it has been declining since then. So what was once a 10% risk premium is now much closer to a 6% risk premium. And there becomes a point where if there's no premium for the utility to get for an investor to invest with the utility over a very stable, low risk stock like a treasury bill, so not even a stock, but a T-bill, it will increase the cost of capital for the utility. So yes, there is some room there for the investors to eat those costs, but there does become a point where it is no longer the case, and it is utility, not state specific. It is utility by utility specific. Now in Colorado, that just means Excel. I realize that, but so I think that's important to note. Two, if you were to finance affordable energy bills for all customers through ROE, it would, in almost every state that I'm aware of, reduce the ROE below treasury bills. So there needs to be some sharing, right? I think, don't pull on any one lever all the way is, I think, we use the energy poverty policy simulator to do a training on energy affordability. And one of the assignments that we give with it is try to solve energy poverty just with low income energy efficiency. Try to do it with just ROE. Try to do it with any one, and you can't end energy poverty with any one of them, except for a PIP set at 6% with 100% participation. But that's more theoretical than it is like practically possible to do. So the encouragement that I give is start with the most cost-effective thing. Low-income energy efficiency is incredibly cost-effective. And then work your way down the supply curve of like, all right, what's the next most cost-effective thing that is obtainable? Tiered discount rates, percentage of income payment plans. Couple those things with the cost control that reduces costs for everybody, so that the cost shift doesn't get felt as predominantly, so that all ratepayers are still held and don't revolt. Like it is the classic all of the above energy strategy. But rather than of energy fuel sources, it's more about energy policies.
Great, thank you. I hope you can stick around a little longer because we have some more questions from board members. Does that work for you, Joe?
Yeah, I could stick around.
Okay, great. I saw Ron and then Mike. Ron?
Yeah, great discussion, Joe and ROE. Appreciate that. While you were talking about that, I was thinking, we have a group of investors who are happy to invest in the nonprofit utilities. They're bondholders, but they make investments and they get a return on those investments. And the investments they make are at less cost than the commercial capital that public service companies and other investor-owned companies use. If we look at these utilities as giant money collecting and investing machines, which I think it certainly bears scrutiny to look at it in that way, then we have to ask the question, what's the lowest cost of capital that we can put in the system? And right now, we have, since 2019, a provision in law in Colorado that says that utilities may, if they wish, use securitized bonds to replace some of the commercial capital at a savings that, just rough terms, is probably 2% or 200 basis points less costly. That can lead us to huge savings hundreds of millions of dollars of savings for consumers. But as a state, we have not used securitized bonds at all, while many other states have used billions of dollars of securitized bonds to work out of various situations like wildfires and high gas price spikes and so on. There is another provision in Colorado law that allows the Colorado Electricity Transmission Authority, full disclosure, I'm serving on the board, to issue revenue bonds to fund some of the transmission projects. To date, we have issued zero revenue bonds to supply that low-cost money to build out transmission. Although we're doing a lot of transmission building out, we're building it out at high commercial costs of capital. So while we sit here, we have two very good potential ways to save consumers a lot of money. They're in law in Colorado, authorized to be so, and we're not using them. So think about that.
Yeah, those are great points, Ron. Thank you for elevating them. The other one, if we want to talk about ROE, if we want to continue to talk about ROE for a little bit, is an idea. I think Ron is also familiar with this, where you put the equity up for bid, where you say, all right, like you put RFPs out for renewables, you put out RFPs for any number of utility programs, put out an RFP of what's the lowest cost of capital that you would invest in Public Service Company of Colorado. That would help create, if you can create some competition, get a lower cost of capital, and therefore a lower needed ROE to the utility.
Yep. This is Ron. I make one other further point. We have a planning process in Colorado that leads to competitive wholesale bidding, and from time to time it produces lots of bids and low prices, which is very good. But that planning process doesn't include the financial planning. It doesn't compare the things like what Joe just said. What if we put some of the capital out to bid? Who would bid in lower cost of capital than the company comes up with on its own? Well, we haven't tried that, so we don't know. And we don't use the planning process to plan the finances for something that I think is a big financial enterprise. I mean, it's a big collecting and investing business, and we don't bother in regulation to plan the financial piece at all. So there's another wide open field we could run around in and have lots of fun.
Mike, did you have your hand up?
I did. I sort of retracted it in the interest of time, but I want to get into this ROE issue. Look, there is a relationship between ROE and customer satisfaction. We know that, and every single year, customer satisfaction is dragged down or boosted based on a couple of really simple measures. One is the satisfaction of the LMI population. Like if they're dissatisfied, it drags ROE down. Regulators are extremely aware and responsive to sort of degradation in customer satisfaction. So we know that there's a relationship between customer satisfaction and the return on equity that utilities either enjoy or don't enjoy. I think for us, the question here is, and I actually do have a question for you, Joe, on your simulator, and I'll leave that there. I wanted to know, have you ever done any work with pay-as-you-go models and pay-as-you-go programs for disproportionately impacted community members, and sort of looking at how pay-as-you-go programs either modulates or reduces arrears, and how that impacts the overall shutoff at utilities?
I'm familiar with pay as you say, but is that the same? Is that the same as pay as you go, or
pay as you go is a forward program? It's essentially like a credit-based program where, and many utilities have this. I think Georgia Power has a pay as you go option where disproportionately impacted people can say pay $50 a month
Yeah.
in advance for their bill, and they get that, and it leads to a significant reduction in impact for the disproportionately impacted. I just want to know if with your simulator, if you've done any work on that simulator, because it would, I think it is a really meaningful program, and it does create different outcomes. I'm just interested in if you played with that.
Yeah, I think the broader term that I know it as is prepay. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, prepay is another. Yeah, that's another program.
So our research yielded not the same conclusions that you suggested about the benefit to low-income customers on prepay. The research that we were able to find on prepay programs, and I haven't looked at, but I actually, maybe 2 months ago, somebody was telling me about Georgia's new prepay program being something that I should look into, and I haven't gotten around to it. So now that I'm hearing a second person say it, I now definitely need to go take a look at Georgia's. But from the research that we were able to do of other prepay programs, what we found was that it actually results in more disconnections. That customers underestimate how much money they can, what they will end up spending. Oh, I did 120. I bet I can do only 100 this month. I bet I can be more conservative. I can conserve more energy than I think I really can. They end up getting disconnected. And again, this is very program specific. So if Georgia's program doesn't have a reconnection cost, then that was like one of the major flaws of many of the other prepay programs is if you did use it all up and you didn't use it up before you used it up before you had a chance to top it back off, there was a disconnection and then a reconnection. So you ended up incurring fees and ended up having a accrual of those fees. So I think it's one of those programs that it's really important to get all of the details correctly. We have we decided to model arrearage management in the model as an alternative because that's the one thing that some of the prepay programs did well is that they were always coupled with arrearage management, forgiveness. And so we wanted to model at least that element of arrearage management. But thanks for calling out Georgia's program. You hear something once and you don't really prioritize it. You start hearing about it more and more times. You can't ignore it.
I don't see any more hands, so I'll thank you so much, Joe. This is fantastic. And I just want to add that your staff, your team members, who I got a chance to meet and hear from at the NASUCA meeting in Columbus, just great team you have. So tip of my hat to them. And please share that, please. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, they're the best in the biz. I am incredibly fortunate to get to work with them. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or them. Cindy, Joe, Hector, I will send these slides and then I'll let you all distribute them to the folks that need them. Thank you again so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, I will say that Hector will put in the drive, correct me if I'm wrong, Hector, the slides that Joe just presented. So that would give us a chance to all be able to see them. I think that where we are now is to talk about pending case strategy, which we have 2 cases, and both are going to be presented by Leslie Sermos, who is our supervisory rate financial analyst, and not too long ago been promoted into that position, along with Scott England, who is also at this meeting. And so that's been a great step and change for our team. So Leslie, why don't you kick us off here, please?
In consideration of the time, I'll try to be as brief as possible. So I will just try to do a general presentation of the main issues with these 2 cases. And the first one I'm going to talk about is proceeding 23A-00635G. This case involves Colorado Natural Gas, and the resistance to implementing straightforward statutory requirements that protects ratepayers. At the heart in this proceeding, it's just a general compliance matter. Colorado's legislature passed a law, section 40-3.2-104.3, that prohibits utilities from offering construction allowances and line extension allowances as incentives to establish a new gas service. And the statute is pretty clear and straightforward here. Utilities cannot subsidize new customer connection through these allowances. However, since Colorado Natural Gas, or CNG, was required to file updated tariffs by December 31st in 2023 to eliminate disincentives, they did file these tariffs, but they filed them under protest with an advice letter challenging the very law they were supposed to follow. So this became a constitutional challenge. CNG attempted to argue that the statute violated constitutional protections, specifically contract clauses and taking clauses of both the U.S. and the Colorado Constitution. They claim that this provision impairs their rights under what they call the regulatory compact to exercise their business activities. However, they did find themselves in quite an awkward position. While they acknowledge that the Commission cannot make authoritative rulings on constitutional matters, they did ask the Commission to interpret the statute using constitutional avoidance doctrines. Basically, they wanted to have both things, the best of both worlds if they could. So what was UCA's strategy? Our first strategy was pretty straightforward. We indicated in our filings that the Commission lacked the authority to rule on constitutional questions. The Colorado Supreme Court precedent is pretty clear on this point, and when a party wishes to challenge a statute's constitutionality, the proper forum is a district court through a declaratory judgment action, not an administrative agency proceeding. So CNG basically cannot use this proceeding and could not use this proceeding as a backdoor for a constitutional challenge. Here's the irony. CNG itself argued that the statute's plain language, text, structure, and context, while clear when responding to staff also intervened in this proceeding, was incorrect, and they couldn't argue its ambiguity. Sorry, I'm having trouble with this word. Then claim that it's not clear enough and therefore cannot be applied by the company. So what we proceeded to do was to focus on its actual purpose, ensuring that CNG's tariffs complied with statute. We filed testimony and a statement of position in support of both staff's opposition brief and Sierra Club's response brief, which thoroughly addressed CNG's constitutional arguments. But we didn't stop merely just opposing CNG's tactics. We also try to provide constructive solutions. Through our witness, Carrie Kuykendall, who is in charge of this proceeding, we provided CNG with commission decisions and commission-approved tariffs from other utilities to serve as templates. We essentially gave them a roadmap for compliance. Our specific recommendations in this proceeding were pretty simple. Deny CNG's arguments challenging the constitutionality of the legislative order, in recognizing that the Commission lacks jurisdiction over these questions. Order CNG to file a revised tariff that complies with the statutes as outlined, and to adopt the specific tariff language improvements that were recommended to eliminate ambiguity and ensure proper implementation. So finally, on October 14th, the administrative law judge who was in charge of this proceeding issued a recommended decision in which it reaffirmed that the General Assembly's directive was proper and confirmed that investor-owned utilities may no longer offer tariff incentives, whether for service lines, meters, or distribution main extensions. The ALJ also suspended CNG's proposed tariff sheets, directing the company to file a new and revised tariff version that fully eliminated these incentives, including those tied to main extensions and utility provide meters and regulators. Why this was important to us? It's important to us because this proceeding just showed that CNG's resistance revealed a larger pattern we see too often. Utilities testing the boundaries of regulatory reform, seeking loopholes and deploying procedural obstacles rather than simply complying with legislative directives. This proceeding is important also because it's one of the tools that the legislators provided in order to try to comply and meet the decarbonization targets that the state has set. So I wanted to, in this case, just ask a quick question, and particularly, I wanted to tap Parks if he's still in the meeting, and I wanted to get his feedback or his impression if he has had a chance to review this decision or has heard about this decision already. What your thoughts are, Parks, about the ALJ's arguments and decision.
I think Parks may have left.
Oh, okay.
I don't see him.
Okay, well, that's unfortunate because I think he would have been a good insight. He would have provided good insight on what their arguments were. But again, UCA, this is an important win for UCA. This matter is not just an economic matter, but also a state policy matter. I can certainly make sure to include the link here. If you give me a second, I'll try to do it at the end when I'm done talking about the second proceeding. I have it open on my desktop too, so I can do it quick. Well, the second proceeding is proceeding 25A 366E, and this is Public Service Company of Colorado's 2024 Electric Commodity Adjustment and Purchase Capacity Cost Adjustment. These two are known also as the ECA and the PCCA. This proceeding is Public Service Company's fourth combined annual prudence review for these filed costs. It was filed on September 2nd in 2025, so this is a rather new proceeding. Currently, we have just intervened. And at stake is nearly $870 million in costs that flow directly through to ratepayers. Approximately $700 million in fuel and purchased energy costs and $89 million of purchased capacity payments. And what this proceeding is about, under Colorado's regulatory framework, certain costs are not built into base rates through a traditional rate case. Instead, they flow through automatic adjustment clauses or riders, which are mechanisms that allow utilities to recover specific costs without full commission review of every expenditure. So the ECA, or the Economic Commodity Adjustment, covers fuel, purchased energy, wheeling, and other energy costs. And the PCCA covers purchased capacity costs. These adjustments exist for legitimate reasons. Fuel prices can change and fluctuate, market conditions change, and requiring a rate case for every variation would become highly impractical and burdensome. But here's a critical point. Automatic recovery doesn't mean automatic approval. The Commission conducts these annual prudence review to ensure the utility acted reasonably. That's where we come in. So the question becomes whether the utility's actions or lack of actions were reasonable in light of the information that we have at that time. So we asked, did the utility act carefully, cautiously, with good judgment? Did they exercise appropriate attention to ratepayer interests in those actions? So UCA's strategy in this proceeding centers on 3 core principles. First, we're vigilant of scope enforcement. We try to ensure that only appropriate costs flow through these adjustments and mechanisms. The ECA and the PCCA exist only for specific variable costs: fuel, purchased energy, and purchase capacity payments. We cannot allow to have other costs creep in through other costs. Second, operational accountability. We examine whether plant outages and operation decisions unnecessarily drove up costs for ratepayers. And this included in this second scope, we analyzed operations of plants such as Cherokee 4, which present serious concerns about operational management and cost consequences. When a major generation unit or facility goes offline, as was the case for Cherokee 4, which experienced a 9-month outage due to underground pipe failure, then utilities have to purchase replacement power. And those purchases have costs that flow through the ECA and the PCCA directly to ratepayers. So our concern focused on whether these outages were avoidable. Could there have been better operational planning that have prevented or shortened these outages? The prudence standard requires us to examine not just whether the utility purchased replacement power at reasonable prices, but also whether the need to purchase that power resulted from potentially imprudent operational management. It is important to mention also that Comanche Unit 3 also experienced both planned and unplanned outages in 2024. And so similar analysis goes through to that. And the third is market behavior. We verify that purchased energy and capacity decisions represented at the least cost alternatives under the circumstances at that moment. And now, speaking of Comanche 3, there's an interesting political dimension emerging around Comanche. Many of you probably have read about this in the news or have heard about it. But some Pueblo community members have petitioned the president to extend Comanche's operations beyond currently planned retirement dates, which raises complex questions about energy transition, community economics, and environmental policy that extend far beyond the prudency review scope within this proceeding. But our role is not to wade into those political debates, but actually analyze the structure and the analysis of the consequences derived from the outages of those units. What are some of the other red flags that we look into in this proceeding? A must-run designation, which is these designations mean the utility runs specific units regardless of economic dispatch merit, usually citing reliability requirements. So we look into those as well. And the question becomes, are must-run designations truly necessary? Do they comply with tariff requirements and good utility practice? Are they contributing to unnecessarily curtailments or high energy costs? And finally, what is our goal in this proceeding? Our goal is to not to second guess every operational decision the company makes, because utilities manage complex systems and some level of unplanned outages are inevitable. But what a successful ECA PCCA proceeding looks for UCA like is one that is ensuring that only prudent costs flow through ratepayers. We create accountability for operational excellence or at least best practices. We protect ratepayers from bearing the costs that resulted from imprudent utility management of their facilities while allowing legitimate cost recovery. And finally, setting a precedent that adjustment clauses are not blank checks. I don't know if there's any questions. If not, maybe we can talk if we have time. I see that we're already over time. I wanted to ask you guys some questions, but if not, maybe
we have time for questions. I
Yeah,
don't see any
okay.
hands, but I wanted to add to your discussion about the Comanche coal power plants in Pueblo.
yeah.
So what I wanted to let board members know is that you have on that site, the Comanche Generating Station, 3 different coal plants, which were known as Comanche 1, Comanche 2, Comanche 3. Comanche 1 is already closed. Comanche 2 is scheduled to close the end of this year, which they're kind of winding things down there, to say the least. Comanche 3 is not scheduled to be closed until 2030, the end of 2030. So that's still operating. The coal pile, as they call it, and it's huge, at the plant is being fed into that unit. The issue for, as far as the County of Pueblo going to the federal government and also potentially others, I know Congressman Hurd, Jeff Hurd, from that district, from the 3rd Congressional District of Colorado, he has already asked the federal government to order that Comanche 2 not be closed at the end of this year, but be required to continue to run under what's known as, what is, the Federal Power Act. That particular, which allows the federal government to extend on a 90-day basis, require on a 90-day basis, which can be renewed, that the plant would still have to run, even though doing so would violate state requirements here, Colorado requirements. This has already happened to a coal plant in Michigan that's owned by, or at least partly owned by, what's known there as Consumers Energy. Something of a misnomer because that's an investor-owned utility. That case is already, the decision by the federal government to require what was just about to be shut down, coal plant, to stay open, that has been appealed to federal appellate court in the District of Columbia by the state of Michigan, but also I believe other entities, including environmental groups, are in that lawsuit. What we learned from our colleagues in Michigan is that really they hear from the federal government, don't shut this plant down, like 10 days before they're supposed to close it, because then the federal government gives themselves the maximum time, because it's only 90 days and that they can award kind of that kind of result to. It brings up serious jurisdictional issues. Like telecommunications, energy is a shared jurisdiction between the feds and the states. And so it's kind of been like something of a mesh between them as to whether it's rates or generation plants or transmission, things of that nature. And those are butting heads in the case that's on appeal now for Michigan. As far as Comanche 3, that's the one that's been down. I think it's 900 days since it opened in 2010. It's an astounding amount. And the current shutdown is until the summer of 2026. Yeah, and you know what happens is the plant starts to, the turbines start to shake. And that's not supposed to happen. So everything gets shut down. But some of the errors that are made at that plant, what's known as Comanche 3, have been seemed to be operator error. And so the question is, are ratepayers on the hook for any of those costs? Number one, to fix it, to first diagnose, they send turbines out to specialists who can figure out what was wrong. And number two, fix them. And number three, what Leslie just mentioned, replacement power. In order to keep all the lights on, the company has to buy power to replace what Comanche 3 can't generate anymore. So it's a really knotty problem in this state. and we'll have to unravel it as it goes, I guess, right, Leslie?
That's correct. So, like I said, the context of this proceeding is mostly to try to find out more information about why these outages are becoming even more prolonged with time, and the effects on the system and on ratepayers who have to pay for that additional purchase capacity. But also try to put into perspective that whether really these were sane choices of projects, and try to consider them for as experience in the future. We just had an entire different proceeding, the just transition proceeding, in which Comanche was also analyzed, and we had different positions from different interveners. Everything from maybe considering an early retirement because of efficiency issues to potentially converting Comanche into another type of facility. So it's a lot. Comanche has a lot of aspects, but within here we're talking about efficiency and cost derived from lack of efficiency.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so thank you very much, Leslie. I appreciate it. I wanted to remind folks that the January meeting will be when Bill Seal's going to give training about, how rates are developed in all states, but in particular, looking to extent different what goes on here in Colorado. What are the different elements that go into that calculation? So I think now we are ready to toss it to Hector.
All right, next thing on the agenda is approving the proposed 2026 UCB meeting calendar. It's in the drive. Let me share it here on my end. Can everybody see the slide here? So just as usual, second Monday of the month, January through May, and every other month, July through November, with the November meeting happening 1 week earlier due to the NASUCA conference. So taking up a motion to approve the schedule for FY26.
This is Terry. I'll go ahead and make that motion to approve that schedule.
Thanks, Terry.
This is Jessica. I'll second.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes, and I will send out Google Calendar invites to all the board members. Thanks. That's it from me.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Hector. This is our opportunity to talk about some new business and miscellaneous updates. Jessica, I saw that you had some questions, and I will give you a call in the next couple of days so I can, sort of feel that out more before I can even answer. But I think I might be able to help you in what you're looking for. And I don't know if any other members have something they'd like to bring up now. Okay, I don't see anything. Any hands, I don't see anybody's hand up. So that would be another motion needed to adjourn.
Well, I'll make that motion.
Terry, we appreciate that. Okay. Oh, Tom raised his hand. Tom, wait a second.
Yeah,
before we adjourn.
Trying to get my video up. Sorry about that. I had it. At the last meeting, when I did our analysis of your role and all that, I talked about providing for you an opportunity to figure out how to use the PUC website. And I'm still willing to do that. I think we just need to get a date set up when people could attend, and I would literally walk you through how to get to the website, how you can get to cases, et cetera. And I know there was interest in it. I apologize. We've been pretty much swamped, as you can tell from our agenda in the past. And even now we're working on a major case where we got 5 pieces of testimony going in later today. But I'm still willing to set that up. So perhaps with Hector and Cindy's help, we can get a date for that in the future and see who wants to attend, something like that. So you can get into the PUC website and figure out what's going on. So I'll leave that for a future day, but I just want to point out,
Okay.
I hadn't forgotten about it when we talked about it last
Appreciate
meeting.
it. And I had made a note of that. Why don't board members message, send an email to Hector if you're interested, and then we can move that, to sometime during one of our meetings together or a separate training. But I think during the meetings is the most opportunity we have together to have a subject like a training like that. Thanks, Tom. So, okay, we had a motion to adjourn from Terry, but before that, I know that Jessica had a question in the chat about the Comanche coal plant and the Cherokee, which is a gas plant, we will figure something out and get back to you on that. That wasn't one of the things I was going to call you about. It's more Leslie sort of tracking it down. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
I made that comment more for Leslie, your presentation today here and the questions that you had posed within the briefing materials. I personally don't necessarily need the answer. Am I curious? Sure. But I posed that comment more to say, in your question, right? Thoughts on the Comanche and its operation. So that's a curiosity I have, which is, if we don't look at its what its performance is, how many days. So we have that data, right? So if we don't look at that and we are concerned about the efficiency, the implications of its cost, right? That would be another way to look at it, even without the online or offline data, to say, well, what's the spend looking like?
Right.
Are you on par? Are you not on par? Are there make-whole payments that are, so that was more my question and suggestion around if that's helpful for what you're looking into.
That is helpful, and it's something that we definitely can look into. So not just for for building our record here and our arguments. I think that's an important comment. I will try to look into that and share information with Cindy and Hector too, so you guys can have it available if you wanted to geek out on Comanche.
Geek out on Comanche. Well, on Comanche 3, which is virtually, it is a lemon of a coal generation plant. I will say that the example I've mentioned to many people is it's like Homer Simpson running the nuclear plant. It's like everything goes wrong. Some intern who works there backs into a control switch and shuts the whole thing off by accident. Literally things like, I exaggerated some, but it's astounding. It's $1 billion plant that when it was built in 2010, the largest coal plant west of the Mississippi, and maybe until California, I'm not sure back then what. So it's pretty astounding. I see Terry nodding, smiling from pain, because of course you're down in Pueblo, and folks may not be aware, but the plant is in Pueblo, but it generates electricity for public service, Excel subsidiary, which is not the electric provider there. The electric provider there is Black Hills Electric. So there's many ironies, to use a word like that come from that. So anyway, more to discuss there potentially. Amy asked, are ratepayers on the hook for Comanche 2 and 3 stranded assets? I'm not sure about the 900 million, but that's been a big concern for us, is this question of stranded assets which would be, if the company is shutting a plant down earlier than its natural life. And the natural life for a coal plant is, 60 years. It's a very long time. So to shut it down after, 15 years means there's a huge chunk of undepreciated asset costs there. And so what happens to that? Securitization was brought up earlier as a potential way for, let me start again. Ratepayers are generally on the hook for that. It ends up at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to make a determination of what assets are stranded and what is the valuation. I believe that's so. But in this state, that would normally just be put on ratepayers, part of what the company makes its usual profits on, etc. Given that securitization would mean that those costs would turn into a securitized debt, really, that would be funded at a lower rate, whatever the rate is, generally speaking, for municipal bonds, that would be funded in that mechanism, which is a much lower carrying cost or interest than you would see from a return on equity. As I think Joe Daniel mentioned earlier, that in this state, securitization is an option for the company to present to the Public Utilities Commission. It was done in our state through a settlement of a case regarding wildfire costs, wildfire mitigation, wildfire prevention and mitigation costs. And, that's sort of a fallout from the Marshall Fire a few years ago. So in any case, the legislature is going to more than likely consider this session, that's going to start soon, whether securitization should not be an option for utilities, but should be something the PUC can require. We'll see what comes from the legislature. I think Amy also asked engineers say Comanche 3 isn't ready to be intended due to the 2008 settlement agreement. I don't know the answer to that. I don't really know even what that's referring to. It sounds like company excuses. Just from my gut, that's what that sounds like. So in any case, we can talk about that more, as it's a lot of money. So we can talk about that more at a future meeting. So anyway, we had, if everybody's okay with this, we had a motion to adjourn from Terry, and I was looking for a second on that.
I'll second.
All right, Sherry, thank you very much. So I think then we can take a vote. Everybody in agreement? That sounds, nobody disagreeing, I see. So we will see you all in January. January is when Bill Steele will be giving his important rate training, how rates are developed. And we have at least one big rate case, which is Public Service XL electric rate case. They publicly said is going to be filed by the end of the year. So that's a dicey little case, to say the least. So the training will be right on time. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy your holidays this year. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Bye-bye.